Lemon. By Kajii Motojir. An indescribable, ominous lump constantly weighed upon my heart. Should I call it anxiety or aversion? Just as a hangover follows drinking, when one drinks every day, there comes a period equivalent to a continuous hangover. That was what had come upon me. But that was not the problem. The resulting pulmonary tuberculosis or nervous exhaustion was not the issue. Nor was the searing burden of debt. The problem was this ominous lump. No beautiful music that had once delighted me, no fragment of poetry that had once moved me, could I now bear. Even when I went out of my way to listen to a phonograph, after just the first few measures, I would suddenly feel the urge to get up and leave. Something made me restless and uneasy. And so, I wandered aimlessly through the streets, drifting from one place to another. For some reason, during that time, I was strongly drawn to things that were shabby yet beautiful. Even in landscapes, I preferred crumbling towns to well-kept ones, and within those towns, I favored the back streets over the main roads, the kind of alleys where familiar sights appeared, laundry hanging out to dry, discarded junk strewn about, and dimly lit, untidy rooms peeking through open doors. These were towns with a certain charm, where the walls of old earthen fences crumbled, where houses leaned slightly as if time itself was pulling them down, where only the plants flourished, with the occasional sunflower or canna flower blooming in unexpected places. As I walked through such streets, I sometimes tried to trick myself into believing I was not in Kyoto but in some distant city like Sendai or Nagasaki. I wished I could escape Kyoto and go to a place where no one knew me. Above all, I longed for peace and quiet, a vacant room in an inn, a fresh futon, the scent of mosquito nets, and a crisply starched yukata. I wanted nothing more than to lie down and think of nothing for a month. If only, somehow, this place could transform into that distant city. Once I began to succeed in this illusion, I would layer it with more imagined details, painting over reality with the colors of my mind. In the end, it was simply a double exposure, the illusion overlapping with the decaying cityscape, and I enjoyed losing sight of my real self within it. I had also grown fond of fireworks. Not the fireworks themselves, but the cheap paper packets of them, painted in bright reds, purples, yellows, and blues, sets with names like Nakayamadara's Starfall, Flower Battle, and Withered Suzuki Grass. There were also small mouse fireworks, each ring-shaped and neatly packed in a box. For some reason, these things strangely fascinated me. Similarly, I had developed a fondness for glass beads shaped like fish and flowers, and for marbles. And tasting them, placing them in my mouth, brought me an indescribable pleasure. There was nothing quite like the faint, cool taste of glass. As a child, I used to do this often, earning scoldings from my parents. Perhaps it was the memory of those innocent days that now, in my weary and worn-down state, came back to me. There was something subtle, refreshing, almost poetic in that taste. As you might have guessed, I was completely broke. But still, I needed a bit of extravagance, however small, to console myself when my heart was even slightly stirred by something. Luxury, in my case, meant something costing only a few sen, 2 or 3 at most, but still luxurious in its own way. Something beautiful, yet something that appealed to my dulled senses in a gentle, soothing manner. These small indulgences naturally brought me comfort. Before my life had deteriorated so much, one of my favorite places had been the Maruzen store. The red and yellow bottles of eau de cologne and eau de quinine. The elegant, cut glass perfume bottles with amber and jade hues, adorned with intricate rococo patterns. Pipes, pocket knives, soaps, cigarettes. I could spend nearly an hour just looking at such things, and in the end, I would treat myself to a single high-quality pencil. But by that time, even Maruzen had become an oppressive place for me. The books, the students, the checkout counter, everything there seemed like ghostly reminders of my creditors. One morning, at the time, I had been drifting from one friend's boarding house to another. I found myself alone in the empty air left behind after my friend had gone to school. Once again, I had to wander. Something was chasing me. So I roamed through the city, passing through the back streets I mentioned earlier, pausing in front of candy stores, gazing at dried shrimp and stockfish in grocers' windows, until I found myself walking down Taramaki Street toward Nijo. There, I stopped in front of a fruit shop. I want to introduce that fruit shop because, of all the shops I knew, it was my favorite. It was not a particularly grand store, but it had a raw, unfiltered beauty unique to fruit shops. The fruit was arranged on steeply slanted shelves, which were made of old, black lacquered wood. The scene was like an intense piece of music, a rapid, dazzling melody frozen in place. The fruits were piled high, as if turned to stone by the gaze of a gorgon, their colors and shapes locked in place. The vegetables, too, were stacked higher the deeper one looked into the store. The beauty of the carrot leaves there was extraordinary. And the beans and arrowhead bulbs soaking in water added to the charm. But the store was at its most beautiful at night. Taramaki Street was a lively area, not as bustling as Tokyo or Osaka, but still filled with light from countless display windows spilling onto the streets. Yet, for some reason, this shop's surroundings were strangely dark. The store stood at a corner where it met the dimly lit Nijo Street, which explained part of it, but even the neighboring house, despite being on Taramaki, was mysteriously unlit. Had that store not been so dark, I doubt it would have captivated me as much as it did. Another thing was its overhanging eaves. They jutted out like the brim of a deep-crowned hat, so much so that one might have thought, "Ah, that shop has its hat pulled down awfully low." Because of this, the area above the store was in complete darkness. The deep shadows made the bright, electric lights illuminating the store seem even more dazzling, like a sudden downpour of light. Standing in the street, staring at the store with its bare light bulbs piercing into my eyes, or peering through the second-floor window of a nearby locksmith's shop, I found that nothing in Taramaki entertained me quite as much as the sight of that fruit shop. That day, I made an unusually extravagant purchase there. The store had lemons, something I rarely saw there. Lemons are not uncommon, but since this shop was just an ordinary greengrocer, I hadn't come across them often. I have always loved lemons. The pure, simple yellow, like lemon yellow paint squeezed straight from a tube and hardened. The compact, spindle-shaped form. In the end, I bought just one. Where did I go from there? I wandered through the city for a long time. From the moment I gripped the lemon in my hand, the ominous lump pressing down on my heart began to loosen. Out in the streets, I felt an immense happiness. That persistent gloom of mine, could it really be dispelled by something as small as a single lemon? It seemed absurd, yet paradoxically true. The human heart is such a strange thing. That coldness of the lemon was indescribably pleasant. At the time, I had an illness in the apex of my lung and always had a fever in my body. In fact, I sometimes clasped hands with my friends just to show off my fever, and my palm was always hotter than anyone else's. Perhaps because of that heat, the coldness of the lemon, seeping through my palm and into my body, felt incredibly soothing. I repeatedly brought the fruit to my nose and inhaled its scent. The thought of California, where it was grown, came to mind. The phrase assaulting the nose from the classical Chinese text, the words of the tangerine seller, vaguely surfaced in my memory. When I took a deep breath, filling my chest with its fragrant air, a warmth surged through my body and face, as if my blood was stirring with renewed vitality. It was truly strange, how such simple sensations of cold, touch, scent, and sight felt so perfectly attuned to me, as if I had been searching for nothing else all my life. That was how I felt at the time. With a light exhilaration, I walked through the streets, even feeling a sense of pride. I thought of poets who had wandered the city dressed in aesthetic attire. I placed the lemon on my soiled handkerchief, pressed it against my cloak to gauge the color contrast, and mused to myself. It all comes down to this weight? This weight, without a doubt, was the weight of all things good and beautiful, converted into a tangible mass. Indulging in such absurd thoughts with an air of ironic arrogance, I was, nevertheless, happy. I don't know exactly where my feet carried me, but eventually, I found myself standing in front of Maruzen. That bookstore, which I had been avoiding so thoroughly, suddenly felt easy to enter. Today, I might as well go in, I thought, and boldly stepped inside. But something strange happened. The happiness that had filled my heart gradually faded. The perfume bottles and smoking pipes no longer captivated me. A heavy gloom settled over me. Perhaps I was just exhausted from walking. I wandered to the art book section. Even lifting one of the heavy picture books felt unusually difficult. Still, I pulled out a book, opened it, but felt no inclination to carefully examine its pages. And yet, cursed as I was, I reached for another book. The same thing happened. Even so, I felt compelled to flip through its pages. But I soon gave up, unable to bear it any longer, leaving the books stacked rather than returning them to their places. I repeated this process several times. Finally, I even set down the heavy orange-colored book of Angra, which I had once loved, overwhelmed by an unbearable fatigue. How wretched this is! My hand muscles ached with exhaustion. I stared at the pile of books I had pulled out and abandoned. Why had these art books, which once enthralled me, lost their charm? I had once relished that strange sense of detachment when, after gazing at each illustration, I returned to the ordinary surroundings and felt the stark contrast. Ah, that's right. At that moment, I remembered the lemon in my sleeve. If I piled these books into a chaotic stack and placed the lemon on top, what would happen? Yes, that's it. A light exhilaration returned to me. I hurriedly stacked books at random, then tore them down, then stacked them again. I pulled out new ones, added them, removed others. A strange, fantastical castle took shape, changing colors from red to blue to yellow. At last, it was complete. With a heart brimming with excitement, I cautiously placed the lemon atop the structure, as if setting a delicate crown upon its pinnacle. It was perfect. The lemon's color absorbed the chaotic hues beneath it, standing sharp and clear in its own brilliance. The dusty air of Muruzan seemed to tense up around that lemon alone. I gazed at it for a while. Suddenly, a second idea struck me, one so strange that it startled even me. I would leave it just like that and walk out with an innocent expression? A mischievous thrill ran through me. Should I leave? Yes, I'll leave. And so, without hesitation, I strode out. A giddy amusement made me smile as I walked the streets. I had planted a golden, dazzling bomb in Muruzan's book section. What if, in 10 minutes, the entire store erupted in a grand explosion centered on the art books? I pursued this thought with enthusiasm. If that happened, the dreary Muruzan would be blown to bits. And with that thought, I made my way down Kyogoku Street, where the colorful, peculiar movie posters lined the bustling road.